It is an honor. I am humbled to be here with you tonight. Thank you for coming out. Well, as you heard, my name is Carolina, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus who is overcoming guilt, shame, and anger. I came here tonight to share my story. The story of brokenness, the story of God's love and grace, the story of redemption and restoration. That's my story. First, I want to thank you for being here this cold evening. By being here, the heart of God is being reflected through you. I know for a fact that He cares and hurts for those who are lost. I know that through you, He is in pursuit of those that, like me, once were lost and desperately needing to be found. So thank you. Please don't you ever think that your prayers are not effective. You're not being heard. I am here to tell you that He who hears every word spoken and unspoken on behalf of their unborn and their mothers hears you clear and loud. And I am here to tell you that I am a living answer to your prayers. So let me share my story. I was born and raised in El Salvador to a very dysfunctional family, an angry mother and single mother of 5. Growing up, the scenario at home was very unstable. We moved from a rented house to another more often to keep even count. My first older brother never met his father. My 2 older brothers lived with their paternal grandmother and only visited over the weekends. My younger sister, of course, had a different father. She was born when I was 5. When she was born, the little attention that my mom used to give me was turned over to her, and I became invisible and felt abandoned. I knew about my father because he used to write me letters often, but I didn't meet him until I was 8 years old. There were days when my mom cooked special meals for us and made us feel loved. But there were other days when we couldn't even look at her without getting her irritated. I grew up fearing my mom's angry reactions, and I never learned to express my emotions and thoughts in a healthy way. Instead, I learned to internalize everything, stuff it in, to overanalyze people's actions and words. I became judgmental and a pressure cooker, steaming and boiling from the inside out. It didn't take me much to explode in anger. I never knew that the strategy I had learned to defend and protect myself would cause me and others the same trouble and hurt I was trying to avoid in the first place. The dysfunctionalities I grew up in were my normal standards. I didn't know any different or better. The results of the many voids at home caused me, at a very young age, to struggle with low self-esteem. I feared imperfection, and I was thirsty for attention, love, and belonging. I sought to satisfy my affection thirst through relationships. At age 18, I met who would become my husband, and with whom only a year and a half from our first date we found out that we were pregnant. My mom hated Frank, and if I would have told her that I was pregnant, she would have kicked me out. We also knew that church would disapprove of our pregnancy before marriage, so we resolved that getting married was the only way to avoid my mom's anger and judgment at church. Still, against everyone's disapproval, we got married to cover our sin. I believe that when the reality of the big responsibility of having a baby settled in Frank's mind, he became a different person. Worry made me very anxious, and I started feeling depressed. So Frank panicked and became really defensive every time we touched the subject of work and money, to the point of becoming very aggressive, verbally and physically. He attempted to stab me in the belly at 20 and 28 weeks of pregnancy. was born prematurely at 30 weeks. And even though I feared for my babies and my own safety, I wasn't willing to deny my daughter the right of having a father figure in her life. In a way, I wanted to amend the void I grew up with. Finally, 5 months after she was born, I separated from my husband at the time. To be a single mother in a country like El Salvador meant I had limited opportunities and resources to provide for my daughter and myself. So I came up with the idea of starting my own business, trade business between the U.S. and El Salvador. And this required me to leave El Salvador and move to the U.S. at least for 3 months, or at least that's what I thought. And my daughter was 8 months, and I left her at the care of my mom's hand. Only a month before returning to El Salvador, my plans changed unexpectedly. I made the radical decision of staying in the U.S. for an undetermined time. My codependent tendencies made me believe that if I took the responsibility and to help my mom with her financial issues and irresponsible habits, and to prove her I was a good daughter, I stayed. I thought that if I provided for her, my sister, and my elderly grandma, she would realize how much I loved her. Once settled in the U.S., I found myself struggling with the cultural shock of coming from a third world country. I was trying hard to fit in, acting like I belonged here. Partying and drinking helped me to cope with the loneliness my new home made me feel. To suppress the pain of being away from my daughter, I became promiscuous. That behavior soon became a lifestyle that quickly led me to a reckless race to a downfall. A year into that lifestyle, I found out that I was pregnant. I feared that a new baby would get on the way to continue supporting my daughter and family financially. I was scared to lose my job. How will I explain my daughter that I left her and now I have another baby? Will she feel the same way I felt when my sister was born? I was mostly scared of my mom's reaction and rejection. I knew she would be disappointed, and after all, I had stayed in this country to gain her approval. Desperate and confused, I went to look for help. A friend suggested that I go to Planned Parenthood, so I did. I had no idea that what Planned Parenthood was all about, but logically I traduced the meaning of the two words. I could only expect they would offer me some type of resource, or at the very least, they will help me to figure it out how to receive prenatal care in this country. Instead, I came out with a solution and a big secret to hide. I was going to have an abortion. The counselor who spoke with me that day convinced me that having an abortion was my best option and only solution. She said that if I didn't plan my pregnancy, I did not have to carry on with it. I was very naive to let her persuade me in such a way. Burying my emotions was familiar to me. I learned that at a very young age, but dealing with the guilt was excruciating. In 2 years, my copying mechanisms had escalated to uncontrollably, just to keep up with my secret cover. And when I couldn't handle it anymore, I moved to a different state. I thought that if I moved, I would be done with all my issues. But once settled in my new residency, I only picked up where I had left off. A few months after, I was pregnant again. This time, I didn't need to worry about it. I already knew what to do and where to go. Emotionally, I was numbed. If I only could find a way to never think about it again. During that time, I started experiencing depression and had suicidal thoughts. I now know that God was in the midst of all. at work. By that time, I met a friend who invited me to church. There, I made a good number of good, godly friends that to this day, they are still part of my life. God have used them to reflect His grace and love for me. Of course, I didn't last too long at this church. I was secretly running away from my reality. I had gone back to the same escape mode, partying, drinking, and doing anything that would take away the guilt I was carrying. During that time, I also met a guy with whom I thought I had found true love. I planned on spending the rest of my life with him. We lasted 5 years in a mutual controlling, codependent, and very toxic relationship. My friends were concerned about me. They didn't approve of him because he was Muslim. I chose him over my friends. So when things went wrong, I had nobody to go to because I was too ashamed to admit they were right and I was wrong. In 5 years, despite all the red flags I consciously had chosen to ignore, several counts of cheating, his behavior couldn't make me feel more insecure. I had no sense of self-esteem. My extreme codependency to him made me to desperately seek his validation. I was exhausted of trying to prove my worth to him and unsuccessfully attempting to change him. In the midst of this insanity, I started to consider finding a church, and possibly through that I could evangelize him. Instead, at some point I found the courage to break up with him. 2 months into the on and off break, I learned that I was expecting. I know my expectations of him were too high, but I hope that the baby will bring us closer and he will finally marry me. I was ready to have a family after all. Instead, I got the least expected response. He told me he wasn't ready to become a father. I honestly don't recall how we ended up the conversation that day, but I remember how I felt. That was a different level of disappointment. I felt betrayed and vulnerable. I have learned that if you make the person who's sitting beside you the source of your strength, you will live a very disappointing life. 3 weeks later, we both were sitting in complete silence, heads down, in a very cold waiting room, waiting for my turn to end his inconvenience and my last conscious sense of dignity. If the source of your worth comes from the way that people look at you, think about you, you will find out quickly that that's a very dangerous place to be. Almost immediately after, I sunk in a very unbearable depression season, fed by the guilt of not being able to stand up for my baby and myself, the shame of the realization of how far down I have fallen. I had never hated myself the way I did. I isolated from the world. I knew I couldn't pretend I was fine anymore, as I had done in the past. I knew I needed God. I knew He was all I needed. I had finally hit rock bottom. I was desperate to find a way out from the trap of despair and the guilt, shame, and deep sense of grief. By then, I was ready to surrender it all to God. I was blessed to find a church where I began to process the dimension of my sin. I asked God for forgiveness and I started to seek Him through prayer. I was also introduced to the Capitol Hill Pregnancy Center, through which I learned about a post-abortion trauma healing program they offered as a part of their free services. That year, I had a first glimpse of freedom. I began to assume responsibility for my wrong choices, and I started processing the negative impact abortion had done in my life. I was still dealing with the heavy baggage I had carried from my past. I tired of living a double life in which I was a Sunday Christian and the rest of the week I was bitter, angry, and a difficult woman that nobody found it easy to be around. Feel better? But sometimes we are not going to feel better until we do better. I had the conviction that I needed to surrender to God and stop fighting my battles alone in my old ways. I knew those old ways had, thank you so much. I knew those old ways had left me exhausted, and somehow I always end up in the same place I had started. By accepting God's forgiveness, I had finally been able to forgive myself and others. My entire life, I have functioned believing that I had to earn everything that was given to me. I now know I don't need to perform to earn God's love and forgiveness. Unfortunately, where you see the issue in somebody's is not where it started. We have to stop it at the source. Celebrate Recovery has given me the opportunity to get to the root of all my issues. Also, to bring to light my deepest secrets, confess to God all my sins, and allow me to start a journey to deeper healing. And most importantly, to have a closer relationship with my Redeemer. This year, on February 4th, I celebrated my second year of sobriety from anger. With a newfound identity in Christ, I am no longer defined by my past wrong choices, nor find my worth in the approval and validation of people. I know I am loved by God and my church community. I have learned that healing isn't a destination but a lifelong journey that I choose to walk one day at a time. I know that God still has a long way to go with me, that I am not perfect, and that's okay. My life verse is being confident of this, that he who began a good work in me will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6. God's purpose for my life is still unfolding. Meanwhile, I continue to seek him daily, and I am committed to prevent ever keeping any hidden sin under the rug, and to avoid the enemy ever using guilt and shame to accuse me and keep me from connecting with God. I am committed to be a vessel to his hurting kingdom, sharing the hope of healing. I have served the Capitol Hill Pregnancy Center as a volunteer peer counselor. Such a pivotal role have gave me the opportunity of ministering hundreds of women in the front lines. I have learned that if we want to save babies, we want to her, the mother, in some cases the father, to feel love and care, not only their babies. Please understand that in many cases, when women find out they are pregnant without planning for it, adding to their situation at home, their families, the father of the baby, their own emotions, fear, anxiety, lack of education sometimes, job or economic situation, all combined can put them in a very vulnerable place. They are in a crisis and they have a need for intervention. I know it might be difficult for us to know and understand their situations and see their perspective, but when we serve motivated by love rather than righteousness, we serve a heart of compassion. Compassion allows us to have empathy, to connect with them, staying out of judgment. Righteousness, on the other hand, drives judgment, and judgment drives disconnection. Whatever the choice the mother makes, it is important that we still love on them no matter what. Being informed of the resources available for them is crucial. We want them to know what their options are. and where they can go after making a decision. Please learn about it. Learn about the service our local pregnancy centers offer. So I thank Liana for being here. That's very important to know all the services that the pregnancy center offers. If the woman still decides to go on having an abortion, do not condemn her. Show her love and compassion. Share about the many post-abortion programs. Even when she made the wrong choice, she still is worthy of love. I remember one day I went to Planned Parenthood for pills, and I was coming out of the pregnancy center from Planned Parenthood in DC, and there was a lady with who was praying outside, and she saw me and she shouted out to me, "You are going to hell." And I remember that at that moment I didn't want to have anything to do with God, but still her words really hurt me because I knew what I had done. So condemning words, judgmental comments are not helpful. And one of the things that is important also is that we know that saving the baby, it is important, but also reaching to the heart of the mother, it is more important than trying to talk about the baby before she has made a decision. So that is very important. I also serve as a co-facilitator for the same post-abortion recovery group I attended years ago. I am humbled to serve other women to heal from their past wrong choices and share with them the hope that through Christ we can be healed. I also serve in Celebrate Recovery leadership team in my church in Capitol Hill area, but currently praying for God to open doors of opportunity to start a Spanish group here in Virginia. As we begin this intense season of prayer, call for unity in the pro-life effort, Christians working together as one body in partnership between God and each one of us. My life verse: what the enemy intends for evil, God had used it for his good. I hope my story is somewhat encouraging and helpful to you to continue peacefully interceding before the throne of God for abortion to end. Thank you for allowing me to share. I know that we, at least when I haven't, found healing, any comment about abortion, any comment about what you're doing is wrong, didn't really help me to find healing or to repent from what I have done. It's really through people reaching out and being vulnerable and showing that they care genuinely is how God had touched my heart, and I have been able to find hope. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.